So Hofstra had then, and I think still does, had a reputation for having top faculty in a relatively intimate environment for a pretty large place, and also for being very progressive. I think the philosophy pursuit of as a career was useful because I think of philosophy as the last refuge of the generalist. I mean, and I think my career reflects that. Gradually, while I taught at GW in Washington for 10 years, I moved into new areas of philosophy that were just emerging. Now, had I not gotten into the field when I did, there wouldn't have been so many opportunities in, for example, medicine. But philosophy gave me the preparation to be able to contribute to an emerging field, bioethics or medical ethics. When I was on sabbatical from the University of Virginia, I was connected to people at a think tank in Washington called the Center for American Progress, which is one of the very cutting-edge policy-oriented think tanks in Washington. And at the time, I was co-chairing a committee for the National Academy of Sciences on human embryonic stem cell research. And as you know, that was a big, in some ways continues to be a big ethical issue because embryonic stem cell research involves the destruction of a human embryo in order to do very important science. And then I got involved with the Center for American Progress, which is clearly an advocacy-oriented group. They are a progressive policy think tank. I found myself in the embryonic stem cell debate, both as an academic and an advocate. And at a certain point, I got a little uncomfortable with that. You know, you're supposed to be a detached academic, right? But at the same time, as an advocate, I had to be pretty passionate. So I actually returned to my philosophy training, specifically history of American philosophy, which I used to teach. And I knew something about the attitude that the founders had as philosophers toward science. I thought, gee, what would the founders think about embryonic stem cells and cloning? How would they see that as part of the American tradition? What is the role of science in America and the idea of America? So I wrote a book called The Body Politic, in which I start with the founders' views about the role of science in the new nation. I didn't call it science then, it was natural philosophy. The word science really doesn't emerge 40 years after the Declaration of Independence in its modern sense. But having the philosophy background, I think, helped me to get unstuck. You know, am I an academic? I'm an advocate. You know, and not to see it only as an ethical question. It surely is an ethical question. How much could you use human embryos to advance science for medical purposes? That is a very important ethical question. But people were so stuck in seeing it in those terms that I think there was a wider frame that could be provided, and philosophy helped me to provide the wider framework. But now with the new issues about neuroscience, brain research, I think that only makes the ethical questions more complicated. There's a lot of speculation that the Obama administration is going to have a new project to map the brain. But mapping the brain raises still bigger, it seems to me, ethical issues, because we think of the brain as who we are. So that is going to be a project, again, that I'm going to be able to bring my philosophical background to. I was fortunate when I got to Center for American Progress that they were looking for new ideas, new approaches to progressive politics. And the former CEO of American Progress was John Podesta, who was Bill Clinton's chief of staff. When Barack Obama won the presidency in 2008, I was able to be part of the transition team for President Obama because John Podesta was the chair of the transition team. And that's also worked into a series of roles that I've had as advisor to presidential commissions. Currently, President Obama has a bioethics commission, and I'm senior advisor to the commission. There's a kind of elegance about the way you're trained in philosophy that is universally applicable, and I don't think any other discipline, traditional discipline, gives you the elegance and straightforwardness that philosophy does for thinking about any new problem. And that enabled me to go into very different areas that I wasn't trained for and figure out how to create a way of seeing those issues because of the very straightforward and elegant way that philosophy prepares you to think.